Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the Artists Index. And today, I think our guest is only the second ceramicist, potter. That's one of those genres that have several descriptions or descriptors. But leaving that aside, when our guest, as always, it's not a new mouth. You think I'd learn how to use it by now. I want to ask our guests to introduce themselves and spell their name.
I'm Wendy Goldsmith, Wendy Goldsmith.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Tell us a little bit about your practice.
Well, I am a hand builder in mid-range firing, which means it's pretty sturdy. It can be microwaved or heated up. And I decorate in different ways. I sometimes impress into the clay with stamps that I have made, or I layer in different colors of underglazes using kind of a reverse stencil process. I make everything's functional, safe to use, and for every day, to make your everyday a fun thing, because my work is pretty colorful and oft-times humorous, and I enjoy bringing that to people and to their tables.
Excellent. That's and pottery, ceramics. Are there any other names for the craft?
Well, it's all ceramics, and it depends on. I think it's just descriptor. Either one can be used. Ceramic artist, potter. I think they're all the same to me, anyway.
Right. Yeah. It's like fiber. Fiber could mean several different things, and there's that line between form and function.
Well, because my stuff is functional. You want to make sure that it's, if you have a mug, that you can get your hand in there and that it feels comfortable. Or if it's a vase, you want to make sure it holds water and it looks good with flowers in it, or any of the vessels. You just want to make sure the form kind of goes with the shape of your designs. And if you have a piece that's just decorated, well, that's okay. But sometimes you really want to make the form go with the shapes that you have.
Now, you mentioned a term when you introduced yourself that you hand build, which is different from throwing.
Right. So I used to do hand. I used to throw on the wheel, but to me, I just enjoy hand building so much more. It's personal preference. So I work from slabs. I have a slab roller, which flattens out the clay. And from there, I have made patterns, or I just take the clay and shape it, cut it, put it back together, and building it that way. Like, each piece of clay is like a little building block, and putting it together into a final piece.
Mm-hmm. Now, what traditions or cultures is hand building more likely to come from?
Oh, I would say when you look through museums, a lot of things from South America and Mexico are all hand built. The little figurines, the genre scenes are, I would say, that's it. But there's also like a lot of people would throw on the wheel and then add hand built accoutrements like handles or decorations.
Yeah, I saw once, I think it was one of them was the jeweler and the other one was the ceramicist. I believe they were brother and sister, Joseph Lone Wolf and Grace Medicine Flower. They were Southwest indigenous people.
Yeah, that's all.
It's all hand built. Yeah. And using a rounded stone or a cobble, it was absolutely fantastic. Even though everybody, ever since Ghost, gets off on the, and probably I shouldn't throw that term about, but anyway, gets off on that term of the wheel thrown pottery, that there's a sensuousness to it. The hand building also has another kind of sensuosity. It's slower, it's more cerebral.
I don't know. I think it's you can control it. Maybe I don't know if I could say that, because all crazy stuff happens. You can control it a little bit more. You can determine the size a little bit more. I'm just talking about for me on the wheel. Just whatever happened, wow, that was great, but I couldn't really get it to go where I wanted it to go.
Right.
So I think it's a little bit more in control of the shapes that I want to make.
Right, and with hand built, especially when you're making something that mimics wheel thrown, because it's symmetrical. I guess symmetry is the biggest challenge, to get that to be as symmetrical and as balanced as possible.
Well, it depends. Sometimes symmetry is boring, but sometimes you need it, for function.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can do just about anything with hand building.
Yeah, my stepmother, God rest her soul, she was. I always when I hear symmetry, I always think of her, because in the living room there'd be the couch, end table, lamp, painting over the couch, coffee table. It was and then on the coffee table, of course, there had to be an arrangement which was perfectly in the center, so everything was so balanced. I always think of that. And then you've got the people who really freak out the symmetrical people by putting something catty corner.
Right.
It's like, no, you can't do that.
Or you look at like Japanese pottery. They, the imperfection is what they're looking for.
Yes. Yeah, that's where the beauty is in the imperfection, because...
or you could buy it at Target,
So how did you get into ceramics and pottery?
Well, I did take ceramics in college, but I ended up, I was an middle school art teacher for 33 years. I did art education, and I did watercolor for many years. And then I think I went back and took some adult education classes at UMass Dartmouth, and just started, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. And just went from there. And I've taken courses at Castle Hill Art Center in Truro. I've been in Maine, Haystack Mountain School of Crafts. I've done a couple of weeks there twice, and many, many workshops. And it's just amazing how people share their techniques, and the people that you're in the workshops with, you just learn so much from other people. And the trick is to make everything your own, and my short attention span makes that very possible.
Really?
Because, I wouldn't remember what someone else showed me. So I'll do what I want.
Now, the Haystack Mountain, that is an institution that's been around for quite a while, isn't it?
Yes, it's way up in Deer Isle, Maine. It's on a peninsula, and it's like heaven. It's just gorgeous. Right. Pine trees on the ocean. And
foggy, very foggy. I was up in Deer Isle, oh my gosh, about 20 plus years ago. And I thought I had seen dense fog down off of East Main Road, East Beach, and Westport and Gooseberry Neck. And there used to be a couple of clubs out there, Shandy's, and I think there was another club during the 70s out there. And getting home, it was almost impossible. We had to have somebody on the. I know it sounds stupid, but we were stupid college kids. We had somebody on the hood of the car gripping the wheel well so they wouldn't fall off, looking for the fog line to help navigate to get the heck out of that fog. It was unbelievable.
You don't end up in the ocean, really.
Yeah. What's the other institution down south that I don't know if they're still viable, functioning, but that was a big arts and crafts center.
Aramont is one.
No, there's another one. I think it has. Is it Black Mountain?
I think that was an older one. Yeah.
An older one. Yeah. No, a middle school teacher When you said that, I felt your pain instantly because I was a substitute at the then Keith Junior High.
I did
which
1 year.
I didn't think the teaching required a sword and shield. It was pretty horrible.
Yeah.
And my brother was one of my students, believe it or not. And he still remembers the first day he walked into class and he saw me and he went, "Oh, this is going to be good." Right. But he helped keep that particular class down. But Dawn Exafaris was the teacher that I replaced. I don't know where she went to from that point. But Ray Basalin, who I got to know working on CETA programs, and he was the superintendent of art, gave me the position. He said, be a permanent substitute for the year, and then we'll do a contract for you next year. And there was a Mrs. Goslin across the hall. Poor Mrs. Goslin. That woman must have cried every single day.
Oh,
it was brutal. I mean, this is art. This is supposed to be, and I hate to use that term, fun, because that's everybody thinks that's all art is fun, or some sort of remedial daycare or whatever. But it was tough. How did you survive 32 years?
33.
33.
Well, I was lucky. The school I was in was a small private school, and the parents were supportive. And at the time, the administrators were supportive. And I just kept them very, very busy. There was, always plan B, plan C, plan D. And I think if you set up the right kind of parameters and expectations, and there was a lot of fun and a lot of room for creativity and everyone to go off on their own tangent. And it was great. I have met a lot of my former students that have gone on to art careers. So, if I had a little tiny bit to do with that, it makes me very happy.
Yeah, wow, that's fantastic. I mean, Keith was always a pot on full boil because the demographics were so, well, there was a weird symmetry. There was the haves and the have-nots, and there was very little in the middle. And keeping that balance, it was just. I was there. I was actually at Keith as a one-term substitute for someone's maternity leave, and huge classes. And they did more projects when I was there than they did the entire year because I just kept them very, very busy. Yeah. And it worked out. It worked out okay. Yeah. It was also at a time too that art teachers became itinerant.
Oh yeah, that's no fun.
That was no fun at all. So every time I see a bag lady or a homeless person with a shopping cart, it flashes me back. Right. On a cart. Yeah, I did that. On a cart, exactly. Yeah. Now, reflecting back, what sparked your interest in art? Because I've asked people this question many times, and there is a fine thread that runs through it. And I'm just curious what that moment was. Well, my mom was a painter, and she was always working on something, and she'd set up in the basement, and when she wasn't looking, I would go over and work on the painting. When I was a little kid, I just do the same color on top of what she did. I don't think she hopefully never noticed, but it's just something I always enjoyed doing. I just was That's always probably one of the best stories I've ever heard. I mean, and I've heard a lot of them, but that was probably like one of the best ones. Yeah. So go ahead. It's environmental, number one. I mean, being around art. Although there are just the opposite stories. A child will grow up in a family of artists and musicians and so on and so forth. They're like, nah, it's not for me. Right. I know my own daughter is like, nah, I could never be as good as you, which I always found silly. Well, it's a creative spark. You give off something. Like my son, who I had, of course, as a student, he said,
because my husband is an artist too. He goes, "Oh no, I'm never gonna. That's not for me." He's now a videographer, and my daughter, who was very creative and went to culinary school, is now a farmer and a floral designer, and it gets in there. You just encourage it, and set a good example. You work all the time, something's going to come out of it.
In your 33 years of teaching and as in your practice as an artist, have you noticed a shift at all in parents' attitudes towards children who decide that they want to be an artist?
Well, I'll never forget. I had one parent conference, with on this one girl. I think she was in 5th grade at the time, and she wanted to be an art teacher. And her parents, she, I brought it up during our conference, and they just kind of laughed and said, "Oh no, well, will probably, go into the sciences so she can have a job." Turns out she's very successful in I think she's a doctor or something now. But I heard this lecture once by Daniel Pink, who said that Stephen Jobs was asked how he chooses people for employees for his tech company, and he said that it was someone who had a good drawing portfolio, because the people who are creative are the future. Everything is technology. Stuff is like exported now and done somewhere else, but it's the creative thinkers that apply all this stuff. And that's hopefully what our country can do, is, be the creative people and go in that direction.
Yeah, Daniel Pink's book, I can't remember the title. The
Whole New Mind. Whole New Mind is, I think.
Yes, the MFA is the new MBA. I believe there was a subtitle to that.
So I'm hoping that works.
Yeah, and it was kind of amazing. And I brought that concept into my MBA classes because I was an MFA teaching MBA students, which is a whole other story. And I think I'm the only one ever to have done it. It was an anomaly, but because there's the fallback. You always have to have that bread and butter job, and I went into advertising, and as a result. That led to an opportunity to teach. I was invited to teach. So, and that was because the department chair at the time was a very open-minded individual. And, there are people who live and die by text, by books. And there are other people who have a broader vision of how things should work. And I was told once, decks or PowerPoint presentations are becoming so standardized that even loan applications now require PowerPoint presentations. So there's more. Well, I think a lot of it is driven because of cell phones and screens. We've become more visually oriented, maybe not astute, but visually oriented, and it makes a big difference. But attitudes in this country are odd. I lived in Portugal for a year, and people would introduce themselves and say, "Hi, and what do you do?" and I'd say, "I'm an artist." And, "Oh, what kind of an artist?" "Painter." "Oh, really? Is your work published? Is it in any galleries, museums? Can I access it? Can I see it?" Here, it's completely different. It's, "Oh, you make any money doing that?" It's a kind of a weird attitude. So I was just wondering if you saw any kind of evolution or any kind of shift. I think I have, because there are some parents who have just decided that they'd rather have their children be happy than miserable. And it's a choice that they're making. So it's a little bit more open-minded than it was before.
Right. Well, I think, being an early art educator, I think, if you just start young and you just open them up the world of creativity, and I can do that, or I can try that, or what happens when I do this? What happens if I change that? If you just get that kind of in their brain, it can be applied to just about anything. I think it's the creative process that I think really should guide just about everything.
If you had the opportunity, and we rolled back the clock back to when you were teaching, say mid-career, and you you had the opportunity to expand the art curriculum, what would you do?
Well, I was very lucky because I feel that I did that. I feel from the very beginning, I could do what I wanted, and I did art history, I did drawing, painting, ceramics, textiles, sewing, just about anything, sculpture, art history. I think I say that, and I didn't have to rush like when I was teaching in public school. You do a lesson, you're done in a period. A lesson could last 2 to 3 weeks. So I think I was very lucky with that, and I would follow kind of the kids' interests as well. So I don't think I would change anything. I think I did what I wanted to do.
Well, that's well, and then again, it's private school, so there's a little, it's a
little different.
The mindset is quite different there. I always used to say, if it wasn't for football, there would be really no music program, and if only football could be associated with art, visual art, that would be a cool thing. I mean, other than making posters for rallies, which is about the only time the arts seem to be valuable, right? Do you have any poster board? Do you have any markers? Right. And so it is a cultural thing. What do you think of the evolution, explosion, presence of the creative community in the South Coast as of, it's not even that old, let's say in the past 15 years?
Well, I'm a member of the Art Drive, which is a studio tour in August. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. August 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And through that, I've met a lot of people, and there are tons of people doing creative things around here, and great studio tours where you get to meet the artist and to show what you've done. I mean, you're alone in your studio most of the year, and here's a chance to get feedback from people. And that's great. People say, that bowl makes me happy or whatever. It's just, that's what you want to do. You want to share your work. And there is, it's a wonderful area. I think starting with the UMass Art Department years ago, which is kind of unfortunately fallen on hard times.
We won't
go there. But, it's brought a lot of people to the area that stayed, or, I'm originally from Fall River, so I'm not too far away. Mm-hmm. It's always been opportunity for creativity, and, the more, the better.
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, I lied. Let's go there. What happened? I mean, I go back to, I'm in the BFA class of 1975. We still get together quarterly. We've stayed in contact, a majority of us, in the painting studio, from the senior painting studio. It was not CVPA back then. It didn't exist. It was a department, I believe, in arts and sciences. The foresight of the people who stitched together Durfee and New Bedford Tech together, went out to a 80-acre dairy farm and decided they were going to hire a world-class architect to design the University of the Future, is astounding. The celebrities, and I was a stage manager, and celebrities and performers that went all through that campus, visited that campus and performed, gave lectures or whatever, was astounding. And then the art department, visual arts, painting primarily, because I'm biased, painting primarily, just started feeding graduate schools all over the country. It was a marvelous time. It was a marvelous faculty. Many of us benefited greatly from our education. And then slowly there was this decline. And I don't know if it's because of society and technology or a combination of those. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I wasn't really aware of a decline. Personally, I'm just so glad that it's coming back and that people do appreciate things that are handmade. And they, because you could, again, go to Target and get a mug, but if you get one that, means something, feels good, I think people really are appreciating. And, people who are the painters who are doing the landscapes, people want to be reminded of this beautiful area that we're in, or printmakers or sculptors. I think it's what makes us human. It's what the arts do. And I think the more people we get to appreciate that and make it part of their lives, it enriches society.
Well, I mean, it was a student potter, who led the counter revolt, so to speak, against the closing of the Star Store. They were subsidized by a private donor. They have their gallery on William Street is not the Star Store. I've not been in the military. I've had military experiences, which are kind of unique. But and in watching MASH, I always used to think watching MASH was very much like going to art school. It was the same kind of vibe. It was the weirdest thing. People bonded in these situations. Of course, it wasn't war, but the bonds were just phenomenal compared to other classes that you would go to.
I went to UMass Amherst.
Did you? And how was it there? Because I mean, that was another another world.
It was another world. And the nice part was, even though it was a huge university, the art department was, like a smaller school within the school. You really did bond with people. You did learn a whole bunch. They had so much to offer, all different subjects. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
So how did they influence you? Do they continue to influence you?
Yeah, sure. They, I was a printmaking major, and then I got my master's in art education. But in the print, you set up a practice. It shows you discipline, how to, accept critique, how to question your own critique. Hopefully a good one. It's a long time ago now. I'm trying to remember, but it was, mostly the camaraderie with your peers, especially in printmaking studios. You're together. It's not like you're off in your own little cubby. You had to share supplies and everything there. And that was great. It was just a really good foundation. That's why I do a lot of drawing on my pieces. I still use some of the techniques used in printmaking in my ceramics. It was a great experience.
Who were some of your instructors?
In printmaking, Jack Coughlin, Fred Becker, who was a WPA artist. I had Paul Barabee, he's a ceramic artist. Hanlon Davies, he was in foundations. Herb Paston was in design. I'm surprised I remember all these.
Yeah.
And others. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. Now, when you were at what is now UMass, was it SMU still then, or did?
No, this is at UMass. This is UMass Amherst.
Right, but
so there was just always that.
All right, you never went to UMass Dartmouth?
No, I took some
just those courses. Yeah. Because when I was there, George Meller, who was a sculptor, was also running the ceramics program. Yeah. They had a raku kiln, which is basically a pile of wood with a hole in it sticking. There was the Japanese thing was
it's for huge pyromaniacs. It's what
it was. Yeah, and
I tried it.
Where college now is, which is it's actually a subfloor of Group 1. They had it. They had it there. It was the weirdest thing. But you also mentioned something about people coming by the studio for the art drive. Jay Peterman, who a lot of people think was only a character on the Seinfeld show. It was Elaine's boss.
Oh, yeah. No, I know what you're talking
they think
about.
he was just a made-up character, but he was, the character was based on the real J. Peterman of the J. Peterman Catalog Company, who did everything contradictory to the advice that he received when he said he wanted to start what was a mail order back then. There was no online, a mail order catalog company for clothes, unique clothing. And he has a little manifesto in the inside front cover. And one part of it says, when will American businesses realize that people want things that make their lives the way they wish they were? So, especially when it comes down to craft, and there's always that tension between art and craft, and some craftspeople get very irritated by it. Some craftspeople say, "I'm an artist who happens to do crafts." So again,
It's words. And
I'm trying to cover all the bases.
People try and put themselves above somebody else.
Labeling, categorizing, cubbyholing, But it is so true that people want things that they do want things that are unique. And you can't find, and I think that's probably why Savers is a place that a lot of people like to go to, because they're going to find something that may have been mass produced, but now, as the decades have rolled on, there are very few of those things left. And even though they were mass produced, they still have a cachet because things are made the same way as those days. So it's kind of an interesting give and take and such. What is, not just for this podcast, but what do you want, or what would you like people to know about you?
That I love what I do. I have a sense of humor that comes through my work, and I think that's probably developed by being a middle school teacher for all those years. Because if you don't have a sense of humor, you're not going to make it. I love the creative process, and I like to share it with people. Okay.
What has been one of your greatest accomplishments to date that you can think of? And it might be several greatest accomplishments.
Of course, my children, but I did have a piece in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. I was commissioned by the Beacon Hill Garden Club to make a piece for the Arts in Bloom series. I can't even remember what year it is, probably about 10 years ago. And the piece actually won some prize. So that was really cool. I think being a teacher was really something, to influence that many kids over tons of years. I've gotten a lot of nice feedback. When the school I was at was 200 years old, we had a show at the New Bedford Art Museum. And I think it was 28 former students who went into the arts at the time, show pieces in the museum during the bicentennial celebration. And that was really something.
I would say that's a high point for sure. Occasionally I bump into students and, they become a blur after a while. There are only very few that stand out. It's just a game of numbers. And unsolicited, when they come up to you and they're all excited to see you again. And sometimes they apologize.
Oh my God, that happened recently. I had a former student come up to me and said, "I'd like to apologize how I behaved in your class." And I said, "You weren't that bad, but thank you very much. It meant a lot to me."
I could have been a better student, but or I have a confession to make. I hated doing these assignments. I saw no purpose whatsoever in doing those things. Now that I have that off my chest, the reason why I contacted you is to tell you that if it weren't for you, I would not have this job. In this particular case, I am the digital manager for Arnold Worldwide. And the assignment that you gave us constantly, that I hated, guess what's the first thing I had to do on my first day of work?
Fabulous. I had one student a long time ago argue with me why do I have to do this? I'm never going to use art. Why am I doing this? Just constantly like a thorn in my side, right? Years later, he shows up at the school and he goes, like, basically, I have a confession to make. He goes, guess what I'm doing now? And it was some sort of computer animation design or something like that. I can't remember what it was. And I said, I told you so. And it was the best I told you so I've ever had.
Well, let me take my hat off to you. Well, I can't because I got the headphones on. But let me take my hat off figuratively to you. 28 students. That is absolutely amazing. One of the things that I've always been interested in, especially being a co-founder of the Artist Index, is what we call, or we don't have a really good name for it, Jeff and I. It's like creative DNA. If you can imagine them not as instructors, but as relatives, blood relatives. For example, I had Ed Tonieri, who was my foundation teacher, drawing teacher, painting teacher. He was a student of Hans Hofmann. Hans Hofmann was a student of that person. It trickles down. It trickles down. I mean, it's like, recipes, why people find traditional or archival, or there's another word for it, maybe ancestral recipes or whatever. There's a little bit of the person who taught you how to do what you're doing, as well as a little bit of the person who taught the person who taught you, and so on and so forth. Do you find that is true in your life at all? Or?
Sure, a little bit. I have these little voices that I have this one ceramic instructor, and just very careful because you got to be careful with the materials and all this about every little bit. You got to put in water, this or that, and I just would hear her voice saying, "Okay, now this is how you're careful. This is how you take care of your studio. Okay, take care of the dust, whatever." And I just hear her voice saying those things, and then other ones. Just different techniques. And I'll think, oh yeah, that's coming from the Barbara Knudsen or, different instructors that I've had in the past. They're always with you.
Yeah, that is true. I thought I was the only one that had voices in my head. Well, but Philip Guston, I believe, is the one that said, when you enter the studio, you're not the only one in there. You have several other people with you. Your instructors, other people are in your head. And then slowly, one by one, they leave. And then you eventually leave. And when you leave, that's when you begin to paint. Mm-hmm. And I always found that quite interesting because sometimes I swear I'm reaching for a certain color or whatever. And it's almost like if you'd imagine a ghost slapping your hand. No, not that color, that color. And even though I've never met my late father-in-law, he was a physician and an artist, a sculptor primarily. It's weird, and I've told my wife and her sister that I really feel his presence in my studio sometimes. It's not weird or scary or anything, but I absolutely feel his presence in the studio. Cool. Maybe because we have 3-4 busts that he did that my wife inherited. But there's something a lot more to this art than just make an art, sell an art, make an art, sell an art. What would your advice be to young artists and perhaps ceramicists in particular?
Mm-hmm. Don't give up. A lot of bad things happen. Things explode. Or I had a problem with pinholing, just different things, disaster. But, when I look at, other artists' work, they're always, they go through the same thing, no matter how experienced or how successful they are, things go wrong, but you just got to be persistent, figure it out, or move on to a different process, and it's just sticking with it and, take some classes, try for different people. I think that's important. It just it stirs up the creative juices and you get support from different people. It's persistence And if you love it, you're going to stick with it.
What do you think of the concept of artist salons? That's been quite a bit of chatter that a bunch of us have been discussing, where it's an event that primarily is for artists, particularly, not only, where we have probably a speaker and a couple of people presenting work for critique, but there's food, there's drink, there's art, there's camaraderie, because you mentioned about isolation, being in your studio. I remember a friend, an artist, who said, I was so sick and tired of being home alone doing my work, so I decided I was going to move into Hatch Street Studios. And I soon discovered I'm alone in my studio again, just in a different studio, because everybody's in their studio doing their work. And we don't punch clocks. Some start in the wee hours of the morning, some work until the wee hours of the morning. What's your take on interaction, commiserating, coffee clatching, whatever, with fellow artists?
Well, I think it's really important. It needs to happen more often. As part of the art drive, we were just talking about the other day how, there's maybe about 30 artists on this tour, and we don't often get to see each other's work because during that weekend, we're all involved in our own shows and trying to figure out a way to do that. And last year we did have a group show, which worked out really nicely. And then we could see each other's work and, meet everybody, because you don't know all of the people. And I think it's a great idea to have more things like that, so you can get some feedback from, people that are creative and that they are familiar with, art in all different ways.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's something that I've been noticing more and more people want to do. I think perhaps the pandemic put a little spark into that concept.
Right, or doing it online,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Like I'm on Instagram, and which is, I'm not that technologically savvy, as my children will attest, but it's brought a lot to me anyway, a lot of other viewers and seeing other people's work, and most of the comments are positive, anything. And I mostly just look at ceramics. I don't get involved in any of the other stuff. But there's a lot of stuff out there that is positive, that you can, just see what's out there and ask questions and hopefully get responses.
And before I forget, I'd love to have your husband on this podcast as well. Tell him it wasn't painful at all. Hopefully it wasn't painful at all.
Well, he's kind of beyond. He retired from UMass. He was a printmaker, and he's moved on beyond that at this moment.
What's his name?
Kurt Wisniewski.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen Kurt in it's been a while. Yeah, I had some pretty interesting conversations with him. I'd love to have him on. I think it's important. Not so much for him for now, but for him for the future, for people to, the faculty that we had, if they had an opportunity like this to do this podcast, again, I'm not doing a biographical sketch. It's just a conversation. Some of the biographical information is put in the companion blog post. But to be able to go back in time and to listen to people, that meant something to you, or you heard something about this specific artist, it's just kind of a cool thing. I've been, on YouTube listening to, Philip Guston, who I have quite an affinity for. He got involved in some controversies, his work did, his estate did. And now he's at the Tate, and all of a sudden it's a whole new thing. So there's I don't know how many YouTube videos about Philip Guston. I think it's important because just like with the artist salon, you want to equate, you want to relate to other artists, not because they're famous, but I think it's kind of masochistic. They have pain. you have pain. So that makes it okay that you have pain because they had pain and they're, you perhaps consider them on a higher level than you because they have celebrity and so on and so forth. And you're still trying to scratch your way to some sort of visibility, So anyway, this has been great. I'm going to wrap this up.
Okay.
Any last words?
I have what is this going to be used for?
It's it's going to be published on our website, theartistindex.com. It's going to be transcribed. The conversation is going to be transcribed. It'll eventually be put into a book amongst all the other transcriptions of these podcasts because people want tangibles. There's now a movement, it seems, where there's a backlash to the digital age. And people want tangibles. They want something that they can look on a shelf and pull out a book and look at it instead of go onto a screen because screens have become so invasive, abusive. There's got to be a better way. And somebody in one of the documentaries that I watched said something to the effect of, once upon a time, if you found the cache of love letters between your parents or whatever, or your grandparents, that would be like, oh my God, this is wonderful. And you would treat them with reverence and awe and so on and so forth. How's anybody going to text? How's anyone going to access your love texts? Where's the longevity there? Where is the hand down? Where is the perpetuity there? And I think that's so important.
Will I be able to access a copy?
Yes, yeah. You'll be able to share it on Instagram. Yes,
okay. Or on my website or the Art Drive.
Exactly. In fact, we do a post on Facebook and Instagram. It gives you all of the platforms that the podcast is released on: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. There's a whole bunch of them.
So, on what is your? If I were to search you on Instagram, what would be Art Index?
I believe it's South Coast Art Index on Instagram. It may be just the Artist Index. It's awful. It's just like
Artist Index.
The Artist Index. Yeah, it's just like you ask me. For the longest time, you ask. It's at the Artist Index. The Artist Index. 3 words all slammed together.
Okay.
People ask, "What's your phone number?" It's like, I don't know. I never called myself. Where I still remember my childhood phone numbers and a couple of jobs that I had. But, so, Wendy, thank you so much for being with us. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did. Sure. And folks, you've been listening to Wendy Goldsmith, who's a ceramicist, artist, potter, all the above. And I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So with that in mind, bye-bye. See you for now.
Okay, bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.